Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Policy Committee on Tuesday, Wednesday, isn't it? Wednesday today. Even now the days are all thrown us. Wednesday, the 7th of January 2026. I have remembered the year, so there we are. Right, and firstly, can I thank everyone for adjusting their work schedules to be here an hour earlier than we normally would be, in the anticipation that the meeting may be slightly longer than usual. So thanks for agreeing to that. Can I draw everyone's attention to page 3 within the agenda, which sets out regulations regarding fire safety and the webcasting arrangements. And for the benefit of those watching from home and those in the public gallery, members of the committee are seated in the front row, and all non-members of the committee in attendance are seated in the rows behind. But that does make the exception of Councillor Steptoe, who is social distancing tonight, bearing in mind he's not feeling too well, but he's kindly attended, and Councillor Marriott is moving along the seat at that point. But that's why Councillor Steptoe is in the row behind, but he is very much a member of this committee. So that's where we're at. And I would like to acknowledge the presence of Councillors Cripps and Councillors Marriott. Welcome this evening, non-members of this committee, but councillors attending, and acknowledging 3 members of the public also in attendance. So thank you for giving up your evening this evening. So there we are. Apologies have been received from Councillor Gary Myers, and on that point, I've been advised that Councillor Myers stood down from the committee as from the 5th of January this year. Councillor Arthur Williams will be taking over, but unfortunately he can't make the meeting this evening, and I'll come on to substitute members in a moment, but I'd certainly at that point like to thank Councillor Myers for his contribution in the current municipal year, for his contribution to the committee. In terms of substitute members, as I said, Councillor Arthur Williams is unable to make it this evening, and I'm very grateful that Councillor Mike Webb is substituting for, technically, Councillor Gary Myers. That's how it works, but there we are. So that's apologies for absence, and all the housekeeping side of things done. So welcome everyone, officers and Vice Chairman and all members. Thank you. Right, if I turn to item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of November. Members, those have been circulated within the agenda pack, and can I take them as an accurate representation of the meeting, and with your agreement sign them? Agreed? Thank you. And likewise, turning to the minutes at item 3 of the meeting held on the 8th of December 2025, can I take those as being an accurate record of the meeting, and likewise signing those? Agreed? Thank you, members. Item 4 is to receive any declarations of interest. Councillor Steptoe. I suspect it's your usual one, but...
Usual, Chairman, as a member of Essex County Council and also a member of the Barling Parish Council.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Any other declarations? No? Okay. Which takes us very swiftly to item 5, public questions on notice. Now, I know that we've received one question from a member of the public, Mr. Pryor, and I think you know the routine by now, Mr. Pryor. If you want to come and take your place at the appropriate point. Make yourself comfortable. Take your time. And when you're ready, begin your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. I have a question about the robustness of the 2022 traffic data provided by Sistra, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, which forms one of the most crucial local plan evidence bases. The data that's in that document informs the site selection and the infrastructure requirements for the local plan, and it is essential that it's correct. Now, I've looked at the junctions that are in the document, and I drive a number of those every day. And my experience of those junctions is very much not what is shown on that document. Hence my wanting to ask the question, will the officers be verifying the accuracy of the data for 2022 across all the assessed junctions to be correct, to ensure that what is forecasted for 2040 is based on accurate data, and not taking the data that's provided by the consultants at face value, because there's little time to do much else.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor, for your question. And it dovetails quite nicely into the fact that it gives me the opportunity in my reply to put into context some key messages in relation to item 7 on our agenda this evening. The Transport Assessment Stage 1, prepared by Sistra, is part of the evidence supporting the Regulation 18 stage of the local plan. This is an early stage, and further work will be carried out before the next stage to make sure the modelling is as accurate as possible. The traffic data for 2022 was drawn from a wide range of sources, not just Essex County Council counts. It includes project-specific surveys, data from the South Essex Saturn model, and other sources such as Google Maps traffic data. This helps to build a balanced picture rather than relying on one data set. The figures shown in the report are averages across the whole peak hour, so they may not match what drivers see at the busiest moments. For example, a queue shown as one vehicle is an average. At times, it will be longer. We know that some junctions in the base model show longer delays than people experience. This is something we're already addressing. Before the next stage of the local plan, new surveys will be carried out at key junctions and more detailed local modelling will be done. We are working closely with Essex County Council, and I would just at that point make the point that Essex County Council are the official highways authority, who are satisfied that the current work is appropriate for this consultation, and they will continue to be involved as the work is refined. In short, the current assessment is good enough to show where the biggest impacts will be from housing, industrial, leisure, and other infrastructure developments, and where improvements will be needed. More detailed work will follow to make sure the final plan is based on robust and accurate evidence. What I'm very aware and wary of, as is sometimes implied by experts, is any shift from the use of the motor car across our district to other methods of transport, as the evidence to date suggests, is quite the reverse. And if I pick out some specific examples, and I'm thinking about the answer to your question earlier, I was thinking about specifics. I go back many, many years with the design of Rettendon Turnpike. And I can assure you that 30 years on, the design of Rettendon Turnpike works an awful lot better than it did 30 years ago. And I was part of the team that helped the modelling. And I drive that route quite frequently at different times of the day. And I join the queue on the 1245 on occasions and curse it because it's in the rush hour. But in reality, I wait generally more than a few minutes. But you do have to look at the balance in the sense of the effect that junction improved the journey time out of South Woodham Ferrers, where there were significant queues. I look at the junction of Holbridge Road and Royce Lane, where there was a mini roundabout put put in a few years back. And yes, at times there will be queues there, but it is considerably better than it was in terms of journey times. And I also look at the report in relation to Ashington Road, and I will be specific about Ashington Road, which is a main artery through our district. And I am concerned that there's areas of the report within the Sistra document which appear to be inconsistent with a lot of the stuff that we looked at the time of the Bloor development. So trying to be very even-handed and balanced, I, along with my colleagues, share a number of your concerns. But I emphasise it is at an early stage, and through examination, through Essex County Council, and through the opportunity, when we have the consultation by ward members and members of the public, there should be pretty forensic examination of the particular points. And I share the concerns that you're raising, and I appreciate that. I know that's a fairly long-winded answer, Mr. Pryor, but I hope that helps. But you may have a supplementary.
Thank you. I do have a supplementary, and it relates to comments made at the previous meeting where we were here as well, and it relates to time, and it relates to evidence base. So at the last meeting in November, Councillor Belton, who leads the council, gave an address to the committee stating that her council would not be submitting a local plan with an unrealistic housing allocation set by the government. Instead, her council would submit a plan for housing target which met the local need for housing, and not a target set by a government algorithm. And many would agree her sentiment. However, I would like to repeat a question I've asked many times since that meeting, which has not been answered, and now is the best opportunity for me to ask it again. Castle Point.
Mr. Pryor, can I just cut in there, please? The purpose of a supplementary is to actually clarify your understanding of my reply to the first question. It's not to go on a totally different topic.
The previous times I've actually asked another question, so I'm going by my past experience of this.
Right.
Now,
Well,
as I've asked this question several times, and it relates to the local plan, could you still hear me out?
I always try and give considerable latitude, but I'm telling you that the purpose of the supplementary question is really to seek further clarification to the first question. You appear, I've not heard your question yet, but you appear to be going down a totally different route, and maybe a totally reasonable question, but I'm...
Okay, so I have another supplementary question which relates to the first question, which I will now ask. And I know that you don't want to answer my other question I was going to ask. Okay, the majority of the traffic assessment data is based on primarily data from 2017, some going back to 2015, and a few gaps filled in, plus Google, etc. So lots of algorithms coming in to drive the base data. And the 2040 analysis predicts an assumption that car journeys can switch to active travel. Active travel is described as jumping on a bicycle or walking. And the modelling that I've read, and Jim can probably correct me, suggests that 5 to 15%, dependent on the site location of travel, can be shift to active travel, i.e. cycling and walking. But this can only happen if residents are provided safe, accessible cycle routes. And the Sistra report references two initiatives to facilitate that shift from car to cycle. Firstly, the Rochford District Cycle Action Plan, published in January 2018, but as far as I'm aware, nothing has yet been implemented from that plan. And secondly, and it's stressed more importantly in the Sistra document, the Essex County Council's Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan, published in July of last year. Now, I attended the meeting here when that plan was discussed by this committee, and it was roundly agreed that that plan is not deliverable because our roads are too narrow and our pathways are also too narrow. So can you assure residents that the the modelling that has the 5 to 15% shift from car to bicycle, and the forecast that goes with that is based on a safe and accurate forecast for residents that's deliverable? and not an outcome based on mass cycling adoption when the infrastructure required to deliver it, frankly, will not be there.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor. The whole purpose of the local plan is to ensure that the plan modelling that they talk about in the report, the infrastructure improvements that you talk about, are put in place. Now, that is why we're going through this process, and certainly the Vice Chairman and I, actually on a totally separate piece of work initiated by the Vice Chairman, are particularly keen at looking at certain cycle routes through the district. And that comes under a different heading within the council work. But I agree with you. We need to actually be moving more towards active travel. But what I don't want, and I alluded in my answer to you in the first question that you gave, I certainly don't think that we should be basing our arguments of less vehicles on the road because of the anticipation of that, which never happens, if you see what I mean. But in terms of moving over to greener, more healthy methods of transport, we certainly support. With the infrastructure, yeah, totally agree. And just by the way, while you are there, you wrote to me privately. I did respond to you on Sunday evening, and I'm hoping that officers will give me answers to pass on to you on the specific points that you made. So thank you for writing to me.
And thank you for hearing me.
Sorry?
Thank you for hearing me.
No problem. Cheers. Thank you. Right, members, that takes us on to item 6, which is the Rochford and Southend Member Liaison Group. There is a report before you. Mr. Quilter, are you going to just talk us through that, the start of that report, introduce it? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, Chair, members, the item before you relates to the Rochford and Southend Member Liaison Group. This group was established to strengthen collaboration between Rochford District Council and Southend-on-Sea City Council on strategic planning matters, particularly where there are shared interests and cross-boundary issues. The report sets out 2 key points for consideration this evening. First, the proposed terms of reference for the liaison group, which are included at Appendix A. These provide clarity on the purpose of the group, its membership, and the way it will operate going forward. Importantly, as set out in the terms of reference, this is an advisory group only and is non-decision making. Its role is to facilitate discussion and share information to support each authority's formal decision-making processes. Second, the continuation of joint working with Southend-on-Sea City Council. This partnership is important for addressing matters such as housing needs, infrastructure planning, and the wider South Essex context. By maintaining this collaborative approach, we can ensure that our local plan work is informed by constructive dialogue and shared evidence, helping us meet statutory requirements and deliver a sound plan. The group also acknowledges the importance of engaging with other key stakeholders, including Essex County Council, the NHS, Anglian Water, and other infrastructure and service providers. Their input will be vital in shaping sustainable growth and ensuring that plans are deliverable. As noted in paragraph 1.4 of the report, the liaison group does not replace the formal governance arrangements of either authority. Outcomes from its discussions are reported back through each council's committee structure, ensuring transparency and accountability. For members' information, Appendix B contains the note of the most recent liaison group meeting held on the 15th of December last year. This meeting covered progress on strategic planning work and reaffirmed the commitment of both councils to ongoing engagement. This evening, the committee is asked to approve the terms of reference and endorse the continuation of joint working through the liaison group. Doing so will help us maintain a strong and coordinated approach to planning across our boundaries. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. It's over to members if there's any questions. Councillor Steptoe, you've raised your hand.
Thank you, Chairman. I do have a number of concerns with some of the terminology. I'll go through it as I've got it written here, but please excuse me from sounding a bit bunged up and a bit coffee. I do apologise. In the recommendation, it says to continue joint working. I have a problem with that because from a public's perception, I think that has wider connotations. So I would like to see the words joint work changed to discuss. Turning to the actual terms of reference, Appendix A, page 23, there's a number of phrases there, again, that I have an issue with. Working down from the top of the page, in the first line, it says to liaise and cooperate. Again, that could be perceived by the public as something far more else. Again, I'd like to see that word changed to discuss. Moving down to the first bullet point, the first line in italics, again it says to identify and where appropriate cooperate. Again, I have a trouble with the word cooperate on the same basis from perception. And in a number of other places through the document, it refers to collaboration. I'd like to see those words changed to discuss. My further point is that I would like to make it clear, and I think the document should reflect it, that in no way has any of the discussions have any basis in legality. We're not committed to anything, we're just listening. So, and I think it's important from the public's perception that they understand that and that is made perfectly clear. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Any other members wish to comment specifically on the terms? Councillor Hoy.
Just on that basis, I've got nothing else to add. Just on the basis of the statements just made by Councillor Steptoe, I'm a bit unsure why we've got a working group then. Should it be a discussion group? And if we're just there listening, what on earth is the point of us attending these meetings?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So in the terms of reference, I don't know who drew these up, but it says that the liaison group will comprise 3 members from each authority with substitutes permitted. There's no detail in there of who those substitutes might be. You handpicked Councillor Linden as part. It's not even representative of the residents. He's got 4 members in his group. We're one of the biggest groups as the Liberal Democrats, and we're not represented at all. I don't agree with this group, the makeup of it, only having 3 members. It's not politically representative. It should be cross-party, meaningfully cross-party, with a member from each group being on this. And we should actually know who the substitutes are going to be and how they're chosen. Is this a substitute? Should Councillor Linden have sent a substitute from his group? It doesn't say in the terms of reference. Could this be any member of the council that could substitute? It's not clear. So I don't agree with this and I won't be voting for this.
Councillor Newport, I mean, you'll know from past points when you've sort of said a representative, the simple fact is you don't make working groups or other groups necessarily a member from each party. You determine the size and you determine how you're going to elect people. But my understanding is that the substitute members will be picked from this committee. But the whole idea of it is to be a fairly informal liaison group. But I don't know whether officers wish to comment further. Mr. Quilter.
Sorry, Chairman, before you go on to the officer,
Yeah,
then
sure.
this should be made clear in terms of reference, because we've had a number of issues with the Constitution where it's not clear on substitutions. It should be made crystal clear, because otherwise I'll be asking the monitoring officer time and time again to clarify what these terms of reference actually mean, and she will not have a clue.
So what would you like to see? What wording would you like to see?
Should actually say where the substitutes are are selected from. That sentence should be in there, as you've just
What's
said,
selected from planning policy?
as it should. Yeah, it should actually state in there and be clear, so all members know where those substitutes come from, and actually how a substitute is going to be selected. Who is going to select the substitute? If Councillor Linden can't turn up because he's at work, who chooses the substitute?
Well, normally substitutes come from your own group, but I mean, in the case of the Southend Airport Authority, there are named substitutes, as you know. That's a different angle. But Mr. Quilter, do you want to comment on any of this?
Thank you, Chair. I think in terms of the points that Councillor Steptoe raised, I don't see a problem with the change of the suggested wording as you've set out. Obviously, we'd have to go back to Southend colleagues to confirm that after the meeting. I think in respect of the point that you raised around the legality of the group, I would suggest that we could probably add some additional wording after the bullet point that begins with the liaison group will have no formal decision-making powers. Sorry, Councillor Steptoe. So in terms of possible additional wording after the bullet point on the second page, the sort of second point down, which begins with the liaison group will have no formal decision-making powers, there could be additional wording that's added to the end of that section, which could set out, for the avoidance of doubt, discussions within the liaison group are advisory only, carrying no legal status, and do not constitute binding decisions or commitments by either authority. But we're happy to share that, obviously, afterwards in writing to the committee. In respect of the points raised around specifics of who the membership of the liaison group, obviously that was, the nominations were set out in the last meeting, I think, under the Chair's update report, and there was that was set out in terms of who the nominated members were to attend the meeting going forward. Again, we'll have to have a look at that. Obviously, this isn't just going to apply to us. This will also apply to Southend under their processes. So we'd need to see what an appropriate mechanism could be, or possible additions could be if that was to be addressed. But I think obviously, as Councillor Wootton has set out, this is meant to be an informal group, and it's the key thing is it's enabling an opportunity for members of both authorities to discuss the matters with each other, and obviously that helps to understand the wider context. But yeah, we can take that away and consider that further.
Councillor Linden. Oh, I take Councillor Steptoe as that was a response to him. It keeps it in context, but I'll come back to you, Councillor Linden.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to clarify, in what you've said, you've also included within the recommendation, taking out the words joint work, just to clarify that particular point. And just out of interest, have we had any approach from any of the other surrounding authorities, Chelmsford, Basildon, on a similar basis at all?
Yeah. So, I mean, we maintain contact with, on an officer level, with our adjoining authorities. So, particularly, we obviously maintain that contact. I don't know if Ms. Goodings wants to pick up on I think we have had some contact with Castle Point, haven't we? So maybe.
Yeah, thank you. Following the meeting that we had where we agreed our response to Castle Point's latest local plan, and I believe members at this committee raised the point around member engagement with members at Castle Point. They have reached out and asked if we wanted member-to-member meetings with them. That's something we're currently discussing. We've got no update as yet, but if we do have one, we'll be able to bring it to the next committee around what format and process that might involve with Castle Point.
Councillor Linden.
Thank you. In regards to substitutions, if Southend have already got a policy in respect of that, then obviously we will follow suit on that. As regards to substitutes, I am quite happy if I am not available for anybody outside the administration to actually put forward if that's acceptable by the liaison group.
I have to say I'm very relaxed about it as well, so I agree with you. Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you confirm whether or not Southend have approved the terms of reference yet, or when they are likely to approve the terms of reference? Because obviously I can't see how it can operate if we've got one set of terms of reference and Southend have got a different one.
Thank you. We have shared the draft copy of this terms of reference with Southend-on-Sea City Council officers. Obviously, they operate under a cabinet system, so it's slightly different approvals. Doesn't need to go through a committee to get approval. The members from Southend that attended that meeting on the 15th and would continue to do so are all of cabinet level, so that they have that approval. A more sort of informal basis. So as I say, in terms of any updates that we would want to include in this as a result of this discussion, we would run those past Southend just to check that that's acceptable. And if there are further updates, we can report back to future committees here in any terms of any other further updates. What in terms of? Oh, sorry. So in terms of the timing, certainly we'll work on this as quickly as possible after the meeting, and we can report back as soon as we've heard back from Southend colleagues. But obviously, in terms of a formal report back to the committee, the next scheduled committee, I believe, is in March. I can't remember the exact date, but there is a planning policy committee currently scheduled in March. But in advance of that, we're happy to share informally.
Councillor Hoy.
So potentially the terms and can you confirm that the terms of reference that we agree tonight will be agreed by Southend, or that potentially they've got to come back to us again after they might disagree with some of the changes that have been made tonight? So would this committee be agreeing a final draft of a final complete copy of the terms of reference or not?
As I say, obviously the terms of reference are here tonight for debate. If there are amendments, we can look into those, and we will get back to Southend colleagues as quickly as possible. I can't necessarily predict exactly what they'll come back with following that, but I think that they're fairly amenable in terms of that being a quick process and agreeing to that. So I would hope that would be a quick turnaround.
Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to clarify, I'm not sure if I heard Councillor Linton correct with regards to substitutes. Was he suggesting that a substitute has to be drawn from a member of this committee or outside of that? Because I think it should be from somebody from this committee, because they will have a better understanding of what's gone before, and if they're stepping in, they'll have a certain amount of knowledge as to.
I mean, my understanding was that it was a liaison group formed of 3 members from this committee. And I think, if I understood correctly, Councillor Linden was making the point that he's more than content that if he knows he can't make a particular meeting, he's quite relaxed about who he picks to substitute for him. And I'm certainly very relaxed about that. The important thing is to get 3 members so that there's representation from this committee. But, I mean, I think we're making a bit of a meal of this, frankly. We debated this all last time, and to chew over every single word for what is against the background, the government has abolished the formal duty to cooperate. And what we're trying to do is be decent neighbours and just talk. And I think we're dare I say, labouring the point when there's other things that we should be moving on to. The spirit of what is intended here, and there's some amendments to be made, I appreciate that, if we agree to those, but we're really making a bit of a dog's dinner of this. But Councillor Newport, you want to come back?
Yeah, sorry, Chairman, and I don't blame you for this, but officers really should have looked at this, because this is clearly a governance issue, and they should have actually considered the fact that if Councillor Steptoe's come here tonight wanting to make all these changes, if we agree to those changes and then Southend don't, and we agree these terms of reference, we can't change them, because that would be within the 6 months. So really should have come better prepared with proper terms of reference tonight that was put in front of us with these points already addressed. And officers, time and time again, say to us, no surprise, it's in the Constitution. And I've sent a number of emails prior to this meeting to the Director of Police, just asking questions on the report, so there's no surprises. But you're saying it's a dog's dinner, but the report's a dog's dinner, the terms of reference is a dog's dinner, and those points are simple points that should have been picked up. It's not new, is it? We've been in this situation. We've had a number of working groups and liaison groups or whatever previously. They've missed it. How it is now dealt with? Because if we agree this and then Southend don't agree it, then what are we going to do?
Yeah, I think to make it simple, I think we set out obviously if the agreements that we've got suggested tonight, if they can be considered by members and then agreed, we will take them to Southend, and if they do not agree, then we'll bring it back to the committee. So in terms of the substitute point, I think we can add that to the document in terms of any substitutes would have to be from this committee. And that can be made specifically for Rochford members. That will make that clear. So I think that would be the best way to proceed.
In fairness, all round, I mean, the agenda was circulated last week, so Appendix A, page 23, has been in the published document. In fairness, it is only Councillor Steptoe that came to me a few days ago, and in the Chair's briefing and on some conversations I've had, Councillor Steptoe and I have discussed it. So in fairness to Councillor Steptoe and in fairness to officers, there has been dialogue behind the scenes. And if any other member had come to me since the production of the agenda, obviously that would have been taken into account. So I believe that whilst it's an interesting discussion, it is Councillor Steptoe that raised his concerns, and I think we've got to push it through a recommendation, an amended recommendation, really I think it's for Councillor Steptoe to just go through the specific changes. Certainly there is an additional bullet point, and I did get draft wording of this, and I would just read out the suggested additional bullet point to see whether we can get agreement on that, and then we go back to the wording in the terms of reference to see whether we can come up with an amended recommendation on that, and then we can hopefully move on. All right. So the additional bullet point reflecting Councillor Steptoe's points would read, for the avoidance of doubt, discussions within the liaison group are informative and advisory only, carry no legal status and do not constitute binding decisions or commitments by either authority. And my understanding is that a conversation has been had with Southend colleagues, and as far as I'm aware, Mr. Quilter, they're generally happy with that as wording, as an addition. So that's the addition there. All right, Councillor Steptoe. Would you be kind enough, please, just to go through page 23, and we'll take each one as it goes. Your proposal is, and if you can just go through the suggested changes you would like.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Yes, referring to page 23 initially, starting at the very top of the page where it says aim, and the first line it says to liaise and cooperate. I'd like to see that word changed to discuss.
So take out liaise and cooperate. And
no, change out cooperate.
So just replace the word cooperate with discuss.
Yep. Moving down to the next bullet point, and it's the first line that is in italics, to identify and, where appropriate, collaborate.
Yeah,
if I can say the word, to change that word to discuss.
Change collaborate to discuss.
Moving down to the next but one bullet point, to articulate the process for and outcomes of any collaboration, to change the word collaboration to discuss.
Well, to articulate the process for and outcomes from any discussion, I think that's got to be. Yeah.
Next bullet point, the word right at the start there, corroboration, again to discuss.
Discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And finally, within the recommendation itself, the second line it says, and agree to continue. At the moment it says joint work. I'd like to change joint work to discuss.
Right.
Chairman, did you also want to include a bullet point about the substitutes as well in my proposal?
Right.
Sorry, if I can, I'm a little bit lost with a little bit of this. So that's in the terms of reference, Councillor Steptoe, your amendments. I think, did you not mention an amendment in the recommendation as well? Because we
That's what I just said. The word joint work, which is in the within the recommendation
Okay.
on the page
So
17.
replacing joint work with to continue to discuss. Okay. And in terms of substitute, I think we said that it would be a substitute as agreed with the chair from this committee.
Yeah.
Are we happy with that?
I'm happy with that.
And where do we want to put that? Jonathan, I wonder where would you put that in the report under the...
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry. Is that in the terms of reference itself rather than the report?
I think that's where it needed to
That's
be
where
added
it's
in
mentioned at
terms
the
of-
moment. Yep.
That's specific to Rochford, not to Southend.
Yep. Okay. Are you happy with that, Jonathan?
What was that last?
To add in that substitution will be from the Planning Policy Committee as agreed with the chair.
So it's specifically a Rochford. It's how we determine who's going to attend. So what's the bullet point going to read?
Yeah, I'll read it out. The liaison group will comprise 3 members from each authority, with substitute permitted, substitutes from Rochford will be from the Planning Policy Committee, agreed by the chair, or as agreed by the chair.
Sorry, may I just ask a question?
Councillor Hoy.
Chair? Why would any substitute have to be agreed by the chair of the committee? Is there a
Yeah. I don't,
what rationale
yeah, I
is
don't think
behind
we
that?
need Yeah. I mean, it is for the individual who's expected to go to select a substitute. Councillor Newport, you're looking bemused. Councillor Steptoe, you can just turn off your mic. Right, so we have a recommendation before us, and that needs to be adjusted to the committee, that the committee approves, subject to the changes. The terms of reference for the member liaison group, and agrees to discuss with Southend-on-Sea City Council on strategic cross-boundary matters, and that outcomes from future liaison group meetings will be reported back to the Planning Policy Committee. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Eaves is seconding it. We've been through the various amendments, so can I just have a show of hands with those in favour, please? That's 5 members for, and any against? 1 against. And Councillor Hoy, not voting. You're abstaining. Abstaining. Thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you. that takes us on to item 7, thank you. And that is the Transport Assessment Stage 1, all 400 or 500 pages of it in the agenda. Mr. Quilter will introduce this item, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, Chair members, the next item relates to the transport assessment prepared to support the local plan Regulation 18 consultation. This is a strategic piece of work undertaken by our consultant Sistra, working alongside Essex County Council as the Highway Authority. Its purpose is to understand the potential transport impacts of the growth being considered as part of the local plan and to inform the consultation process. It is important to stress that this is not a final assessment and does not identify specific mitigation measures at this stage. That work will follow as part of the Regulation 19. The assessment uses a base year of 2022 and future year scenarios to model the cumulative impact of all proposed development sites, potential development sites, sorry. It shows that, as expected, there are significant pressures at multiple junctions across the district and that a range of interventions will be needed to manage these impacts. This is exactly the purpose of Regulation 18, to identify the scale of issues so that we can develop a robust mitigation strategy in the next stage. A few points about the methodology that may be helpful. The base year model is built from multiple sources, including traffic counts, project-specific surveys, and regional modelling data. The outputs report average conditions over the full peak hour, which means that while the model may show a low average queue length, that does not mean queues never exceed that figure. There will be short periods where queues are longer, and this is reflected in the approach taken. No model is perfect, but the overall pattern of delay and congestion aligns with what is observed on the network. Further refinements will be made before Regulation 19, including new surveys and the development of local junction-specific models to capture conditions more accurately. This will allow us to test detailed mitigation options. We will continue to work closely with Essex County Council throughout this process to ensure the transport assessment remains robust, and we will need to liaise with neighbouring authorities to understand how their proposed growth interacts with ours and affects the same transport infrastructure. Coordinating mitigation strategies across boundaries will be essential. It is also important to note the difference between a local plan transport assessment and site-specific assessments that are normally undertaken as part of planning applications. Site-specific assessments focus on individual junctions and often apply conservative assumptions for a single development, whereas the local plan assessment looks at cumulative impacts across the whole network using strategic modelling. This broader approach can result in different capacity forecasts, but it does not imply that there are no issues. Indeed, the modelling shows significant stress at many locations. Finally, the assessment recognises that physical constraints will limit what can be achieved at some junctions. This is why the next stage will need to consider a combination of measures such as demand management, sustainable transport improvements, and potentially revisiting development assumptions, rather than relying solely on physical junction upgrades. In summary, the transport assessment is a critical evidence base for the local plan. It highlights the challenges we face and sets the stage for developing a comprehensive mitigation strategy. It does not make key decisions on site allocations or mitigation at this point. That will come through the Regulation 19 and further engagement with Essex County Council, neighbouring authorities and other stakeholders. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quilter. Right, who's first with their hands up? Councillor Reeves.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of questions. I don't know if you want to take them one at a time. The first one is a simple one. On page 48, we are told that the National Highways have wanted to be engaged in this. Have they been involved in this at all yet?
Sorry, Chairman, I can't hear Councillor Eaves at all.
Okay, I'll try again. Is that better? We're told on page 48 that National Highways have been wanting to engage with us over the transport assessment. Have they actually been engaging?
Thank you. No, not at this stage. So they will be obviously needing to be engaged with. We don't have any strategic road network in our district directly adjoining, but we obviously do need to understand the wider impacts beyond. So clearly where for example, the A127 meets the M25 at junction 29, that clearly at that point becomes National Highway Network. And the A13, obviously, to a point, is also the National Highway Network. So we will obviously continue that work. There'll be a need to engage with them. They will also obviously be consulted as part of the Regulation 18 consultation. So we anticipate their response for that.
Members and officers, can I just ask you, please, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you please put your mouths close to the microphone? It's not the most brilliant of systems, but people just seem to come and go, and we need clear. I think I come over reasonably clearly when I speak, and I think it's the job of all of us, bearing in mind people are looking at this meeting from home, to speak close to the microphone, and please not be constantly reminded. Every now and again we will drift our heads, I know that, but please do a little better.
Thank you, Chair. I shall make sure I shall chew this microphone in future. My next one is a bit more of a serious point. When we look at specifics, I know we're not looking at specifics tonight, but this is the example that I need to use to get my point across here. We have in the Sistra report, say for instance, where you've got Ashington Road, and it looks to me on the Sistra report that 2040 we've got capacity there to actually increase the amount of traffic onto the roads. But when we went to the appeal for the Bloor site, there was general agreement from the professionals who were involved there that at 2028, Ashington Road would be full. So I'm a little bit concerned that we are getting professional reports from both ends. We are asked to consider these reports, but even the professional reports conflict. So we've got one that was brought to the Bloor appeal, which says that there is no capacity beyond 2028 because the road will be full to capacity. But the report we've got in front of us now says 2040 there will be room. So that's one of the questions. The thing is as well, what they do actually point out in a lot of the junctions that are mentioned here is that they can be mitigated to take more traffic. The problem we've got is an example that we've got because of the Bloor Homes appeal. There were 3 junctions there that required improvement. That was Daly's Road, Rectory Road and Amber Lynn. When we came to the appeal, I asked at the appeal, because we had details for the mitigation at Daly's Road and at Rectory Road, but we didn't have anything for Amber Lynn. And I asked specifically then what those improvements were going to be, because I could not see, as an amateur, how they could actually do any more improvements, because each arm of the roundabouts there has already got 2 entrances into the roundabouts. So members will not fail to recognise that there has been no actual mitigation done at Anne Boleyn roundabout, because I don't think it can be done. But they get planning permission because they're told they can do it, which then becomes a real problem for us, as we're well informed, but we're amateurs, and we're relying on the professionals. And I'm seeing that in this, there's so many discrepancies between professional advice that we're getting that I'm finding it really difficult to actually understand how we can progress on this. I've got some other things to say. I don't know if you want to take that first, Jim?
Thank you. So in terms of the point around the capacity, in terms, I know you referenced a specific example, but across the whole area, obviously, as I mentioned in the introduction, the approaches of a strategic model such as this compared to a more specific model that's applied to a planning application, there will be differences from that approach. However, I think it's clear to say, obviously, that we are at an early stage through the Reg 18. It does set out within the transport assessment that there are issues on the network, and there are junctions that are going to, if they have no mitigation, that there will be capacity issues. So I think in terms of broader points, when it comes to the next stage, obviously, say the Regulation 19, as mentioned, there will be a need for more further survey work to be undertaken. We will need to continue to work with Essex County Council as the Highway Authority. They will ultimately need to be satisfied that the work is robust and is representative, and obviously this is a proportionate evidence base to deal with, obviously, in a local plan in comparison, which is very different to a planning application. But ultimately, if there's any mitigation that is identified, and in terms of touching on your point around the possibility or the ability to deliver improvements to particular junctions, clearly they do need to be deliverable. So if there is anything that, obviously that work is still to be done, if those junctions are not capable of being having any meaningful mitigation applied to them, then of course that will be something that we would not be able to rely upon further. So, and it's a package of measures. It's not just about additional road capacity as mentioned. So obviously there is a whole package that we need to look at. In terms of any sustainable packages, clearly again they need to be demonstrated as being deliverable before they can be included within the infrastructure delivery plan. So that there's a whole host of work that's required to provide that further reassurance. But just to reassure that the work that is being done is obviously being done closely alongside the Highway Authority, and we need to make sure that is being clearly checked as we go. So there's certainly not the case that we would proceed with that, knowing that this is unsound. Clearly, we need to have sound evidence, and this is very much the common approach when it comes to local plan evidence for transport.
Two more, if I may, Chair. The next one is one that's been touched on to a degree already, is modal shift. We've pretty much all in agreement that modal shift is an aspiration, but it's not a possibility with the situation that we have at the moment. When we're talking about public transport, it's pretty much all in the private sector, so I'm not sure how modal shift can happen. We do have a particular problem with the bus delivery situation. I have a resident who came to me who relies on the bus to go to work at Southend Hospital. Because he has to get on the bus at the peak time, that bus is quite often full. And when it's full, it doesn't stop. So he's late for work. So when we have this kind of system where if there's capacity, tough, and where there are options for more buses to come at certain times that aren't being considered at the moment, maybe that'll be something that'll be considered further down the line. I can't see that modal shift is going to be being encouraged. It just seems a little bit more aspirational than actually really possible. So from that sort of point of view, I think modal shift is something for this particular district, because we are known as being a very wide area geographically. It's something that I think if we try and include that in our area plan, we are going to fall foul of it badly. So I just wonder if officers have an answer to that as to how we have to deal with this actual requirement that is foisted onto us.
Thank you. So I think obviously on a higher level, we have to be mindful of the fact that the local plan is the opportunity to identify patterns of growth that are more sustainable. Now, of course, with any area where growth will happen, there's going to be challenges in terms of encouraging people to use sustainable means of travel, whether that be public transport, bus, train, and also active travel in terms of walking and cycling. But certainly that's a key factor in terms of the way that, you know, as much as we can in terms of understanding where growth will happen. And in terms of larger scale sites, there are potentially more opportunities for what's called internalisation. So whereby if you are creating large schemes, that there is more opportunity to have, for example, the employment and other uses within the scheme, which mean that people are less likely to travel further. Not to say they won't, but there is potentially more opportunity for that. Looking at it on the other side, if for example, if development was put in a very remote location, now clearly that's going to put more pressure on people potentially using their car as a means of travel. I think it's also fair to say that there is certainly no assumption that everyone will use, no one will use their cars. That is clearly, obviously, the way that we all live in this world, and that's something that is clearly has to be accounted for in terms of those impacts. The challenge is obviously of bus use specifically. Clearly, we are again reliant upon the highway or the Transport Authority in terms of Essex County Council. The local transport plan 4 is something that's being worked on. That's clearly a wider strategic plan that the highway authorities are required to prepare, and sets out the future vision and strategy about how they see future improvements being undertaken. So we need, again, the work needs to be cognizant of that and that emerging work. And in terms of specifics, if sites are deemed to be needing improvements to buses, clearly that's something, again, that can be flagged as requiring potential financial contributions, or at least identified through the infrastructure delivery plan. So I think there's certainly acknowledge the challenges, not shying away from that, but I think it's fair to say that obviously the opportunity to try to address some of those matters is the opportunity for a local plan process. That's the important part.
And finally, Councillor Reeves.
Thank you, Chair. Last one. I've worked quite closely with the LC Whip recently. And as has been mentioned by Mr. Pryor earlier on, the sites that they have identified for the cycling infrastructure network are pretty much undeliverable. The problem that we have is that although this report from Sistra has picked up on the route that I am championing at the moment, which would link Rochford and Rayleigh, that is only a secondary consideration in the LC Whip. The problem that we have there then is we have a contradiction, because the LC Whip are the organisation that are tasked with delivering or at least recommending the delivery of these particular routes. But the Sistra actually takes more of a realistic view of those routes. So who takes precedence here? Is it the LC Whip? Is it Sistra? Is it us? I'm a little bit confused on this, because we've got professionals against professionals here who are giving contradictory advice.
Thank you. So I think probably going back to my earlier point, really, any mitigation that is ultimately identified, and I say at this stage that's very much high-level views that have been set out by the consultants in terms of what needs to be investigated further. There will need to be obviously that further discussion around what the feasibility of potential improvements to, in this case, cycle routes. So I think we certainly need to make sure again that anything that is ultimately going to be potentially relied upon and could be factored into the transport assessment work needs to be obviously have that level of scrutiny, again proportionately. Need to be understanding obviously of what that means and whether it's practical to deliver, because ultimately anything that's going to be included within the infrastructure delivery plan is also going to be subject to scrutiny through the examination by an inspector, because they're going to want to understand that obviously anything that's in there, broad level costs are kind of in the right level, and that's been factored into viability work. But certainly in terms of the points you've raised, I think that the LC Whip is very much a key document that Sistra will have to have awareness of and consideration of, and then that will need to be considered further in discussion with Essex County Council.
If I can just add to that as well, it's worth noting that the initial LC Whip report that we've got is a stage 1 report. So the analysis shows those broad corridors where county think there could be demand for certain routes, but actually they have committed to a stage 2 addendum to that, which will be as we identify for the local plan, development sites, locations for growth, that network will be refined, and we'll consider, for example, if you've got a certain amount of housing or employment coming forward in certain part of the district, how can that help to leverage those routes to deliver them, and perhaps those routes need to be slightly
altered or adapted to take into account that housing area, for example, both in terms of how to fund it, but also if you have, a large housing estate, actually the route could divert to run through it, for example. So I think, we've always been realistic that the LC whip is as we have it, is a first stab, but it needs further refinement, and, we will work on that. And, as the plan progresses, it's something to keep at the forefront of our minds. But, on a more practical day-to-day basis, I think it is now that we've at least got a draft consultation document, and that is moving forward. We need to get back around the table again with our colleagues at county and, talk about next steps again, because, we did commit to meeting with them quarterly to talk about progress, and it's timely. So, we'll get onto that. Thanks.
Thank you. I really just want to come back to the point that Councillor Eaves made about bus services, and I think we've got to hammer the point through as members, and I'm sure I represent many members and many residents here. The bus service generally, and I'll say generally, across our district is not good. In fact, near where I live, they've cut the half-hourly service down to an hour. So it's not even worth going on, because if you miss an hour's bus, you've got a 2-hour delay. And this concept that is pushed out from time to time, that we're all going to be a bit like Cambridge, we're all going to be jumping in bicycles, and we're all going to be jumping on public transport, it's just a complete and utter fantasy. There are some exceptions across the district. There's some very good bus services, I know, and I'll name the X30, always seems to be running up and down London Road when I'm there, and there always seems to be a number 25. Those seem to run, and I'm sure there's one or two other good ones. But this concept that is often put before us, that we're all dying to run onto other means of transport, is just a complete and utter fallacy until the infrastructure goes in place. So I really want to hammer the nail on that particular point when we're looking at wider infrastructure. None of us are against it, but we'll only use it if it's actually there and it's safe for us to use. Now, look, I broke a bit of a convention when, in my eagerness, I moved over to Councillor Eaves and members before acknowledging that we have visiting members here, Councillor Cripps and Councillor Marriott. I know that Councillor Cripps indicated that he would like to address the committee under item 7, and I don't know whether Councillor Marriott, you wish to say anything. But it is a convention, bit of a convention, not a written rule, but a convention that we allow non-members to address the committee on an item. So, in fairness, I ought to hand to you. Then I've got Councillor Steptoe, Councillor Newport, Councillor Hoy, in that order. But Councillor Cripps, your call, but if I can be fairly tight on time.
All members go.
No. I think you should. Let's stick to the convention. What I am going to do tonight is avoid us moving into discussion mode, because it's a huge agenda, and we've really just got to listen, as we did to Councillor Eaves, listen to their various points, and then move on to the next person. I want to avoid turning it into a discussion tonight. So please go ahead and make your points.
Okay, thank you. I knew that might be the case, so I've already submitted the rump of my questions and observations to the planners directly, like I always do. I won't be asking questions tonight, and I've got 3 points I'd like to make. The first 2 are one, really, and it's a bit of context that I've noticed in reading this transport assessment. There's a useful figure 3 in the SISTRA assessment, which does a 24-hour graph across the page to model both the morning peak and the evening peak and the bit in the middle of the two. And it's generalised and rounded up into an average, because of the 29 junctions, obviously they're all different. Some are worse than others and so on. So they've used a computer to average it. But it does give us a little insight, albeit not qualified, of what the new loading we've got on housing is doing to us. In terms of the 2 morning and afternoon peaks, it says and shows it's approximately a 20% cracked in loading on our roads and our systems, 20%. What I found interesting beyond that was the peaks are not spikes. They're more like pyramids in shape. And what that does, while the morning's still running down, and before the afternoon starts going, before the afternoon starts going up, we've only got a 4-hour gap. It's roughly 10 o'clock till 2 o'clock. And at the moment, the graph shows that running at about 50% of what it does at peak. And that will be plus 10% according to the graph there. The impact on that will be another 10% loaded on that. So I thought that was quite a good way of understanding what this is doing us in very broad terms. If you move on into a little bit more detail, I start to cross over some of Adrian Eaves's points, really. There are 3 of the 29 junctions that are already red, category F, right now. That comes from the 2022. Okay? No amount of waiting for no cars on the road. That has to be attended to. But the reason I've really cited that particular one is to influence what I've noticed right across the board, that you're not dealing with just one junction. The nature of our minor roads and so on, it's a domino effect. You can see it by just looking at the detail on there. So, for example, I'll give you a chain. You mentioned earlier about the Retterton Turnpike and so on. Well, one of the red ones already is Hawk Hill Roundabout. That's the roundabout that joins onto the turnpike. Next up is the A1245 and Royal Lane. It's a roll-on, a domino effect. And when you get a bit further up the road, if you choose to go down the A1245 to London Road, head towards Rayleigh and think, no, I think I'm going to try and miss Rainey, and you turn down Downhall Road to take you across to get on Hambro Hill, that one is double red. Both ends of that are red, category F. That road is about, I measured it on Google Maps, about 1 kilometre long. As Councillor Eaves says, I don't see where you're going to get any improvement and mitigation on there, because the houses are both sides of the wall of the road, right up to the curb, wall to wall. And incidentally, I will mention that in the original interim traffic assessment, when I insisted on that being monitored and done, Sistra didn't want to do that at first until I, through the officers, insisted that they did it. And that's what's come up. So I've asked the question of the officers, is there any other minor junctions that have not been done by Sistra that might throw up something similar? And I think the reason that's in the context, again, of what has been said already tonight, is that there's no doubt in my mind, because I've been into it, and as you know, I go into it in infinite detail. There are quite a few of these junctions that have got nowhere to go. They are boxed in on both sides, and I think we've probably thrown a few mini roundabouts here and there to T-junctions where there was a bit of room to do that, but they're not ideal because you've got two people giving way to the right and you get the hesitation and so on. And the other one that I insisted on being done was the mini roundabout junction between Hambro Hill and Hockley Road. And that is now showing during the course, not now, but during the course of it, it goes red there as well. So the point I'm trying to make is there's a whole big issue here. There are clearly major junctions like Hawk Hill roundabout, like the A1245 as a main road, and indeed Royal Lane. Plus there's others. The Fair Glen interchange, for example, which is so strategic that it's got to be done. And so, as I would suggest, Hawk Hill roundabout, got to be done. There's quite a lot of got to be dones. So let's get away from this idea that getting everybody to give up cars and what have you is the only thing we've got to do to solve the problem. We don't. There is physical mitigation to be done, and that's going to cost money, and I will deal with that a little bit later. I'm going to move on now to mitigation itself.
Yeah, I have got to ask you to speed it along, please.
Okay. I'm going to talk about mitigation itself, and I'm going to mirror what people already said, really. The transport assessment relies on a vision-led approach, which in plain English is a culture change on car dependency. They list a number of things to achieve this. One is a sustainable transport system, and they're going to be talking to bus companies and other type organisations to get that in place. Another one is LC-WIP, of course, in terms of the cycling and walking aspect of it. And the crunch one is a very definitive statement in there that they say. It says it is essential that services and facilities are built on the site in order to encourage this to work, i.e. people have got to have that opportunity. Now that suggests to me that you've got to have that in place, at least alongside the houses, if not before, to achieve it. And having looked at that and some history, and I will qualify my statement and give you my reasoning. I think, to be polite, that is a very optimistic assessment of what can be done. I don't believe it can, and I will explain why I believe that. I'll turn you to the existing local plan. All four sites, none of them have delivered any of that at all. Nothing. 2 of them were supposed to have schools, and that hasn't happened. None of them have got doctor services, and there's certainly no convenience stores, which actually, Sister are saying, you need everything, a takeaway, a general store. They're talking about, doing the job properly, in my view. That's what it should look like, right? But the chances of that happening. So I'll let you understand why I don't think that'll happen, okay? Section 106 on the existing local plan has proved not to work. It isn't exclusive to Rochford District Council. The Scrutiny Committee at Essex County Council last year did a report on all 15 councils, and it was the same answer over and over again. The NHS don't step up with their part in order to make it financially viable, in order for the companies to take it on. Schools, Hullbridge, a small community, it copped for 500 houses. They're now busing junior children to school elsewhere because there's not enough school place. How do we end up putting 500 there with no school? Or at least extending the school or another school? So the track record's not good, right? A recent development, which has made it even more tenuous, is the fact that the mayor will not now be in position until the other side of this local plan, even the start of this local plan. Now, the big spin we got with devolution was your mayor will hold the money and he'll get you your infrastructure because he has the authority. Well, that's not going to happen because he's not even going to be elected at that point when we're doing this, the later stages of this. Yeah. So what chance of getting in? The government, that's what our risk number 4 says on the local plan. It says failure for infrastructure to be delivered by the various parties, i.e. Essex County Council. And the response to that is apply for funding from third parties elsewhere, i.e. the government. Well, the government have been telling us for 18 months that we're skint. We've got a big black hole. So I don't see anything coming from there. SIL has not been defined. We don't even know how much it would be. I don't think it would apply to the build early starters because it'll be too quick for it. It might apply perhaps to the big golden suburb style of thing, because they've got a 7-year lead in, you've got time to get through the civil process, which incidentally has to go to an inspector for approval, because we wouldn't want to be cheating the developers, would we, of making a profit? So
Councillor
I'm going
Cripps.
to stick at that. I don't think that is feasible, and it's the crunch, it's the heart of that Sistra document is what they're basing it on. It doesn't work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cripps. Look, you always talk on these subjects with passion and an awful lot of sense, that's why I've given you 12 minutes, a lot longer than you would actually have in full council, but I've never wanted to constrain discussion and debate, because you make this, and my appreciation to you for going through the report so forensically and making the points. And you speak with passion, but actually we all share in this chamber a lot of the points that you make. You'll be well aware that I've consistently batted on about Section 106 funding. Councillor Steptoe headed up an excellent report in county, and yes, you're right, it is a frustration. But let's not lose sight of the fact that this document is supposed to inform the local plan process and put structure around development and planning. But we've got to make sure, as I responded to Mr. Pryor a bit earlier, the accuracy of that information to make the right decisions in terms of informing. And what we're doing tonight is actually cross-examining various parts of the document in front of us, and making sure that the various experts, we cross-examine them and get some degree of consistency. Councillor Eaves made it, you've made it, and others I'm sure will make it. So thank you very much indeed for your contribution.
Just to thank you for the 12 minutes.
Okay, well, it's about 7 minutes more than you get in full council, so there we are. But thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate you taking the trouble to go through that. That's helpful. Right, moving on, I'm going to take Councillor Steptoe, and a bit like Councillor Eaves, I'm going to say everything that you want to say. Generally, you just get one bite of the cherry tonight, otherwise we'll be here all night. But make it a good bite, Councillor Steptoe.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points before I start, with reference to Councillor Eaves' comment around Amber Lynn. It is in my division stroke ward, and I have contacted County a number of times to understand what they had in plan for doing the Amber Lynn. I suspect that they're waiting for the gas company to do the gas pipes down there, which there are two coming down from Walders Bridge. One then tees off and goes up Sutton Road, and the T-junction for that is right smack bang under the middle of the roundabout.
Councillor Steptoe, can I ask you to get your mouth a bit closer to the microphone, please?
Okay. So that's probably the reason that they're holding fire on the Amber Lynn, or what's going on there. With regards to Councillor Cripps' comment there about S106 and the NHS, just out of interest, the NHS, Tom Abel will be attending, has been summoned to a meeting in March, I'm not sure the exact date yet, to explain why he's sitting on all this money right across county, something in the region of over 8 million quid. So we're waiting, that should be coming back in March. Okay, moving on to the report, Chairman. I do have a number of issues with this, as I've already spoken to you about over the phone a number of times. The recommendation is saying that this committee notes the transport assessment and its findings. By doing so, we are accepting its findings, and I'm afraid I can't accept its findings. I'm struggling to do that. If we'd been sitting here 50 years ago, who would have said that the A127 in 50 years' time will be running at around 110, 120% capacity? You just wouldn't know. We had good bus services then. I remember riding on myself. So how do you look at it? We're sitting here looking into a crystal ball. That's the only way I can describe this report. I'm unhappy with the way some of the junctions have been assessed and what the report is saying. So to give you an example, I came here this evening, I left home at 5 o'clock in Little Wakering. It's 11 miles, took me 50 minutes. That's about an average of between 12 and 15 mile an hour, right the way through the district. That's just not reflected in this report. Now, I know for many reasons over the years I've had a number of surveys done across my area. So, for example, Southend Road, over a 7-day period, including a weekend, has 84,000 cars going backwards and forwards along the Southend Road past Lawson Groom. You mentioned earlier, Chairman, about the Ashenden Road. A survey carried out in July 21 shows that it had 124,000 cars going along Ashenden Road, both north and south. I hadn't got the figures for Hall Road, but you can bet your life a lot of those cars were then diverting up Hall Road. Certainly the cars, but the HGVs will be again going down Southend Road. Shopland Road, and then that runs into the Sutton Road. Sutton Road itself has 115,000 cars on a weekly basis. That's including a weekend. Try coming through there at 4:30 or 5 o'clock of an evening. You're queuing right the way back into Southend. This report just does not reflect it. It just does not seem to understand it. So I'm struggling very, very badly in finding a way to, as it says here, to note this transport assessment. I don't think it faces reality. And I think our public speaker earlier on said that. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. So at this stage, unless I hear differently in the next half an hour or so, I don't think I can support it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Funnily enough, following, and I think I'm right in saying Councillor Newport, seem to recall it was this side of the chamber, this comment about noting, I've given it thought, and I'm a little bit concerned that noting is very weak on occasions. There are occasions when it can be used, and there's other times when we need to be much stronger. I've actually, and I'm not putting it just yet, but I am actually suggesting, because what I don't want is all this discussion to just disappear into the ether, and that's not being disrespectful to officers I know that are listening, but I don't want it to disappear into the ether. Oh, we've got that meeting of the 7th of January out of the way. They noted it, so let's move on. We've got to do better than that, and that's in no way critical of officers, but there's a lot of good stuff coming out tonight and a lot of work that's been done by members to look at this. I'm not putting it just yet, but it might help you, Councillor Steptoe, that I am minded, but I'll listen before I put it as a formal recommendation, to add in that the committee notes, subject to reservations reflected in comments and discussions at the planning policy meeting of the 7th of January, the transport assessment. That is what I'm minded to go down. Now, it may be you don't agree with it. You're pulling a face, Councillor Newport, so clearly you don't. But it's in an endeavour to try and address the noting bit that Councillor Steptoe. But I don't want to debate that just yet, if I may. What I would like to do, because you made your points, Councillor Steptoe, very well, but I think it's right and proper to go on to Councillor Newport next and listen to what he wants to say about the report.
Thank you, Chairman. So, and I'm pleased to hear what Councillor Steptoe has said, because I think sat in Swain Park School quite some time ago. It was myself, Councillor Steptoe, Councillor Hoy, and Councillor Lumley that actually kicked off the independent transport assessment. But what I'm hearing from members is that they don't think the data is very robust, and I agree with them. I've looked at this report, and I'm not going to go through it junction by junction, but if I just take one page, for example, which is not in my division, but Councillor Lumley's, sorry, and I will declare an interest as a member of Essex County Council here. So the Downhall Road, London Road junction actually has a section 106 from Wolseley Park to actually change that junction and mitigate some of the traffic from Wolseley Park, which hasn't been done yet. But there's no reference to that in the report. It's like RJ and Sistra haven't spoken to one another. And it would have been really helpful, I think, tonight if we had actually had someone from Sistra here. Because, as you've referenced numerous times, they're the experts, not these officers. We could have had someone from Highways here. I have had meetings with Highways telling me that they will come along and speak at committee meetings. They are open to being here. We do not invite them in. We should have them here. They are the experts that should be in the room. We are talking about data in these reports that I do not think is robust. And I think that residents will also read this report and say, what a load of cobswallop. Because it is. It's not reality. Councillor Steptoe has made numerous references to areas in his division that he hears about on a daily basis, no doubt. I have areas in here that I hear about, Rawriff Lane. It's just not reality. And residents will not accept this. And I am here, and I was elected to do the best for my residents. I'm not going to consign them to a life of misery sat in traffic on the back of a consultant. I'm not prepared to do it. And I won't do it. And I will not be supporting this, and I will not be supporting it with reservations. I will outright refuse this report. I think Sistra have a lot of work to do. We were not confident with RJ. And I think in time you will see that most members at Essex County Council are not confident with RJ when we have a new highways contract procurement go through. But I think on the basis of this report, I think we would be doing our residents a total disservice by accepting this, what we have in front of us. They should be here to explain it. They should be here to talk us through it. On the basis of what I see in front of me and what I've heard from officers, I can't accept it. And I actually want to go on to the LC Whip as well. In October, we sat here and the Director of Place put in front of us a report for noting on the LC Whip. Councillor Reeves has made a rather bold statement saying none of it's deliverable. Well, the Director of Place never said that. So I would like to hear from the Director of Place as to whether the LC Whip is deliverable or not, because that has major impacts on funding from active travel. Without an LC Whip, we will get no funding. If that LC Whip is not deliverable, I'd like to know. I'd like to know exactly if the Director of Place agrees with Councillor Reeves that it is not deliverable. Because as far as I was concerned, we had a report for noting and an LC Whip in front of us that was deliverable. So I'd like some clarification on that, please, Chairman. And I'm going to leave it there because I think we could do this to death. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Newport. I think the Director of Place should come back on that specific question from Councillor Newport.
Yeah, so the as Mr. Kudler said, the LC Whip is a stage 1 report which identifies broad corridors in which cycleways will be are supported, and then the detailed work would go underway as to the exact detailed technical specifications of those roads. So we believe that they are deliverable within that, and as part of the local plan process, we would be identifying cycleways through the infrastructure delivery plan and through the policies in the planning related to specific, if there are specific sites that will be required to either put in some of those cycleways or contribute to those cycleways, we'll be looking to identify those within site-specific policies. But obviously, as we don't have sites within this version of the plan, they would come forward in the later iterations of the plan. If I could go on to the wider points that have been made by members, I think just to be clear, as Mr. Quilter has said a number of times, this is an interim report. This is a baseline position. If members have any technical questions, we did ask if they wanted to provide them before the meeting, where we could have got technical answers from them, from Sistra to present to the committee. But in terms of the report, it is an interim report, and we will be taking it forward through the local plan process with, as Mr. Quilter has said, further work. Members' comments, we're very happy, and we are noting them down today, of course, but members, on behalf of their ward, behalf of their ward work or behalf of their residents, can, of course, and we encourage them to submit detailed written comments into the local plan consultation, where we can pick them up formally, and then they'll be part of the formal process, and ultimately, reported back through this committee in terms of the responses that we've received and then how we've dealt with them. So I'd certainly encourage members to do that. But I think it's really critical that we absolutely acknowledge that transport is a huge issue for residents in the district. We know that. It's one of the biggest challenges for delivering the local plan. And we do absolutely need to look at it incredibly carefully. The tests in the local plan, the tests in national government position are that the impact on the transport network has to be severe. That is a very high bar for transport, for congestion to meet. And we'll be working with Essex County Council as the Highways Authority throughout the process to understand whether they believe growth within the local plan has a severe impact on the network, and if that impact can be mitigated or not. And that will be a key part of what we do when we're looking at the site allocations and going forward to the final version of the plan. But Essex County Council and also Southend on Sea as Highways Authority and the neighbouring authority and National Highways have we spoken about. We'll be liaising with them and Sistra continuously throughout this process. Before you're making any decisions on sites, you'll see the mitigation, whether it's possible or not.
Thank you on that point. I think it's just worth pointing out at that point, and it certainly predates you as Director of Place, but it was a little bit like pulling teeth in the law application, because the definition of severe, and you would expect there to be some sort of objective definition, and no one was ever able to come up with what severe meant. And it causes immense frustration, because I know what severe means. There's a clear definition of it, and yet when we went to highway experts, they continually talk their way around it. And I'm just going back to the painful process that a number of us went through, and Councillor Eaves was front and centre of the highways assessment, and the word severe was quite a contentious. I mean, our MP raised it in government circles, and we know what severe means. But highways people see. What we've got to be a bit careful of, and I'm going to say it, is we don't duck and dive on this just to suit a particular agenda. We need to be very objective. But that was before your time, and the pain still sits with us in terms of the word severe. I'll look at Councillor Eaves. He's still got the scars from the sitting in the inquiry that I sat at for quite a few days. Councillor Newport, you wanted to come back.
Yes. Chairman, can I just pick up on a point of order, please? Listening to what the officer said here, and I know I'm suffering with a cold, so I may have misheard. I think the officer just said that regardless of what we say about this report, they will be taking it forward. Is that correct?
No, I said the report is an iterative report, which will continue on it throughout the process, and would welcome members' comments through the process on it. I mean, ultimately, perhaps we'll need to discuss consequences on the next item if you were not to approve the transport assessment tonight, but that's certainly not what I said within my comments.
Okay, Chairman, I apologise to the officer if I misheard. As I say, I'm struggling with the hearing a little bit, but I will pick up on the point about technical questions. The report was sent out to us, I think it was late Thursday, early Friday. I did my best to try and read it on a computer screen, couldn't do so, requested a copy of the printed version, which I received at 3:30 from yourself on Monday. So for me to go through this report and understand it and be able to agree to it has been impossible. So I'm sorry, but I'm struggling with it.
Okay, Councillor Steptoe. Councillor Newport, you come back.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The point I made, Chairman, about the communication between RJ and Sistra wasn't picked up by the Director of Place as to whether they actually have been speaking to one another and looking at I've heard that Essex are working with Sistra, but it's not apparent in this report that they've been working, because clearly they've overlooked this section 106 and the plan for the junction. It's not even referenced that there's a mitigation measure to be implemented there very shortly. And this is a plan that should be robust. The data should be robust. We've all heard from Councillor Eaves that he has doubts about the data. Councillor Steptoe has doubts about the data. We certainly have doubts based on our previous decisions about RJ and their data and the way that they look at these traffic surveys. I've had traffic surveys done with, and then when I speak to highways officers, they say, oh no, you don't look at it like that because that's a certain way we do it. And that's the point I was trying to make by not having the experts in the room to explain it to the committee, because they're not here tonight to actually answer those technical questions that no one in this room really understands. And what we're doing here, we're just racing down a road, because we're lucky we can race down the road, because residents certainly can't race down our roads, but we're just racing towards another disaster. And that's my concern. And as I've previously said, I am not confident with this report. Stage 1, stage whatever, I'm not confident. I would like to have this report put in front of us with the experts in the room.
Thank you. Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll do my best not to repeat anything that's already been said, although it'd probably be quite difficult. I agree with, I think, most councillors who have spoken so far, if not all of them. I do take the point, which this is apparently a stage 1 assessment, but whatever you say about that, it still informs the draft local plan regulation 18 consultation, which we're looking at next. So we can't ignore it on that basis. The plan does find existing problems. It says car use is dominant, high car ownership is within the district. Congestion hotspots already exist, although, as with other councillors, I don't believe it identifies them all correctly. Public transport sort of says uneven, but I think it's non-existent in certain areas, and that walking and cycling networks are fragmented. Well, again, I'll say non-existent. There's probably about 3 or 4 cycling routes I could name. The impact of planned growth, any strategic monitoring here already shows that the local plan growth will significantly worsen congestion without any mitigation, and without any intervention, growth would also increase car dependency. And the solution and the recommended approach to this is effectively a decide and provide approach, prioritise sustainable transport, shape growth around reduce car reliance, use highway expansion only where necessary. Mitigation may be improved walking and cycling links, bus service enhancements, better rail station access, maybe corridor-based highway measures. And funding, has been mentioned by Councillor Cripps, it just goes section 106 and SIL's still not defined, we still haven't done it. External grants and partnership working with Essex County Council, or maybe the government, or maybe the mayor. It's just not there. Where is it going to come from? I'm aware that it's not supposed to be detailed. There's no idea about junctions, what the junction improvements could be. There's no confirmed mitigation packages, what would be. This may be coming at stage 2, admittedly, or stage 3, or stage 4, who knows what stage, or stage never. And there's no delivery phasing at the moment. I assume there would be eventually, but who knows. There's no... There's, as Councillor Eaves said, it just relies on future modal shift. I think Councillor Newport said it at the last meeting. When's this modal shift ever going to happen? We've been talking about it for 10 years, if not longer. I think ever since I've been on the council, that's 15 years. We talk about modal shift, but it's not happened. So the report says, yes, there are these problems, we'll solve them by modal shift. There's no evidence in this transport assessment to show how that modal shift will happen, and I've not seen any. There's no, as far as I can tell, there's no, and I think it's again probably mentioned by Councillor Cripps, I can't see any evidence that the cumulative impact of settlements has been addressed at all, if properly. And so I'll stop repeating myself now because I'm going to go on again. And these need to be addressed. And on the basis of that, I cannot support this. I'll be not noting it. I think that's the first time I did that was in this meeting last time. I couldn't note a report because I don't think it's possible to note, and I don't think it does our residents any favours to do so. If I can just ask some questions for the officers around those points, though. Could I just ask them the modal shift? Can you confirm which of the sites tested in the local plan can realistically achieve the level of modal shift assumed in the transport assessment, and which ones cannot, given existing bus rail and active travel provision? Which transport mitigation measures identified in the transport assessment are fully funded or committed, and which rely on future bids, viability assumptions or third-party decisions? We don't know, we're finger in the air, potentially. I suspect I know the answer to the next one, but how would the phasing mechanism work? So if we're going to put mitigation in, how will we make sure that's done in time or before the housing is done? The cumulative network capacity. Can you just confirm, has the cumulative impact of multiple sites feeding into the same corridors, e.g. the one A130, A127, Raleigh approaches, have they been tested to a point where overall network capacity is clearly understood? And finally, if further modelling at Regulation 19, and there will be further modelling, I understand, this is stage 1, shows that some sites cannot be mitigated to an acceptable level, will those sites be removed from the strategy, reduced in scale or replaced elsewhere? And how do we address the fact that we've done a Regulation 18 consultation, that Regulation 19 we may have to change it, but we haven't yet consulted the public about it? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy. And you've asked specific points there that you're asking. But there is quite a big overlap with what a number of members have said tonight, and clear unease. And I was actually your specific questions, but also I was going to ask officers generally to address that, because there is clear unease about this as a document. I think we're in part paying the price for a lot of this coming out over a lengthy bank holiday period. And certainly, I was thinking a day or two ago, the way to have addressed this really was to have had a member briefing where the consultant was in the room and we could have points raised. And I think that is a difficulty we're facing tonight. But if you would like to address the points that have been raised, and take some of the broader points, and I haven't brought Councillor Linden, but he will be unless Councillor Webb wants to come in with anything, but Councillor Linden and Councillor Webb following on from the officers, then I'm going to be pushing a motion to extend the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Wotton. So I'll pick up on some of the broader points and then Mr Quilter will come in on some of the details, so hopefully we'll capture everything. So in terms of the broader points, I mean, just to be clear, Sistra are a specialist company appointed by Rochford to undertake the work. Essex County Council, as Highways Authority, are therefore consultees on the work and are involved and are looking at all the data that Sistra produce and assessing it against their own data and making sure that they're happy with it. And Mr Quilter could go into the detail of the engagement that has involved between Essex and Sistra, but it's just to be clear that they are two different bodies, but they are both obviously heavily involved in this. And ultimately, Essex County Council as Highway Authority will have a very clear position when it comes to the local planners to whether they would support what we're proposing in terms of housing numbers and positions of sites, ultimately as to whether they think it has an acceptable impact on their network or not. We've talked quite a bit about modal shift today, and I think we've all agreed that it's something that we want to do, but it's something that we need to be sure we're doing in terms of the infrastructure. And I think it's fair to say if you look at any transport assessment across any local plan across Essex, it will be suggesting that an element of modal shift will be required in order to accommodate housing need. And that can be a range of things. You know, we've already talked about, for example, having a primary school on a site which people can walk to drastically reduces that element of travelling. But also the government direction in terms of the NPPF is suggesting that anything that is close to a railway station is considered sustainable because people will commute by rail. Now, we all know that you won't make every journey by rail, but I think there's lots of things that we need to look at on modal shift, but it's not an issue that's going to go away. And I appreciate with us being a more rural district, things are more difficult. We do have a much more fragmented network in terms of cycleway. Also, the distances obviously are significant. So if you're in the rural areas, walking and cycling is less. There's less opportunity for that than there is if you're in one of the more major urban areas. So it's not something that's going away in the ultimate transport assessment, I think, for the final version of the plan. But we do absolutely take on board the need to make sure that any sites that come forward will need to deliver infrastructure in order to deliver that modal shift. And then perhaps sort of picking up and taking forward, this transport assessment as it stands, we would very much like to publish it for public comments. We appreciate that you have comments on the document, but we also think it's important that the public get the opportunity to have their say on the document, and we could publish it alongside the local plan as a document for consultation. And just to be really clear, the next item we'll get onto in terms of the local plan, as you'll see from the local plan document, we aren't allocating any sites within the local plan within the next item. So we have made no decisions on sites based on the interim transport assessment that you have before you today. So I just wanted to make that clear in terms of the relationship between the two papers you have, and then perhaps Mr. Quilter can pick up on a couple of the detailed questions.
Thank you. That's helpful. I mean, what concerns me is there is a theme running through tonight, expressed by members, of a lack of confidence in the data that is being put forward in the SISTRA document here, and that's a problem for us as members in trying to reach some sort of recommendation. And look, there will always be debate on things like transport. Is about perceptions, but there is a feel of factual failures on the part of SISTRA to identify certain things. Now, in fairness to SISTRA, they're not in the room to be able to defend themselves, but I'm trying to think how we're going to work around that one. I'm going to listen to Councillor Linden first, Councillor Webb, if he wishes to come in, and then we've got to move forward. But I'm just conscious that we are approaching nearly 2 hours of debate here tonight. It's by that clock 2022, but it's actually a few minutes behind. So formally, the meeting has now lasted roughly 2 hours. I would like to move a motion without notice in line with Committee Procedure Rule 9N to extend this meeting. And I'm not keen to make it open-ended because, in fairness to certain people here tonight, they're suffering with the colds and the snuffles and the things that are going around at the moment. So, but I don't think we can go on any longer, in fairness, realistically, beyond 9:30, which is another hour and a few minutes. So to extend this meeting to a maximum of 9:30 in order to complete the business, I do need a seconder, please, for that. Councillor Linden. And can I have a show of hands, please? Those in favour? That's 5. Those against? Those abstaining? 2. So the meeting.
Could we have the heating turned down a little bit? I'm starting to cook up this end here.
We're going to notice it when we go outside. Right, on that point, could I just ask Councillor Linden and Councillor Webb if you can do your best not to repeat some of the points have already been made because there has been an element of repetition, but I think officers are very clear on the feeling on some of the main points. But Councillor Linden, to you first.
Thank you. I've heard what all the members have said, and I agree with a lot of issues. But this is an initial plan which has been put forward. 2 questions. 1, if we don't know tonight, what happens? 2, how much weight are you actually going to be putting to this, and listen to what we are saying, and then challenge some of the queries that we're putting forward before we take this forward as a plan. There's a lot of, you've heard a lot of queries in here. You will have a lot of queries because it is perception. It is what people actually see and believe. You talk about mobile. If you go into London, you'll see Boris's bikes and everybody else's bikes in there, but they're all sitting up. How they're being used, I don't know. In fact, if anything, it's actually encouraging more people to go into London to get on the bikes and use them further in their cars, that is. So yeah, it's a very hard thing to actually do, but we've got to start somewhere. We do have to start somewhere. I would like to be positive, and I would like to support this tonight, but we really do need to know, 1, if we don't, what will happen, and 2, how much weight you're going to put and how much you are going to challenge what we have been asking you to challenge on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so in terms, obviously, if we're not able to note the report, it won't be available for public consultation, so we're going to miss that opportunity for those public comments to be made on that document. So that's clearly key to us to understand that. We understand the concerns that have been raised. Clearly, that, as we've already outlined, there is still a lot more work to be done. This is a stage 1 report. There will be more work to be undertaken, further surveys, etc. And certainly in terms of the points that have been raised tonight and others that maybe, if it is to be noted that we can consult on it, that will also include the County Council so they can formally make their comments. Again, we're going to still be working with them in the background as we have been already. But I think it's really important that we allow for people to provide us that input. And obviously then we can, as we've said before, that will need to be accounted for and dealt with by the consultants. I've gone through obviously previously around the points that have been picked up already around the accuracy of data. Clearly there is going to, as I say, there's going to be more work to address some of that anyway. In any case, we acknowledge that. But I think clearly as the fact this is a stage 1 report, we're informing a Regulation 18, which we obviously will come on to the next item, again is a draft version. It's not the final version, as Ms Goodings explained. It's not there's no proposed allocations in that document at this stage. It's obviously identified sites. So I think it's just trying to give it that context, really, that is the reason, as we have done with all the other evidence documents we've taken to previous committees, that there's the opportunity for people to raise those formal comments to those, and obviously that will inform our work going forwards. And clearly, if there are some fundamental issues that we need to address, they will need to be addressed. Obviously, before the final version of the plan, the Regulation 19 comes before members for their decision.
So by noting it tonight, is it going to enable you to actually take this forward and actually work on all of the queries that we have got? By not noting it tonight, it means that you cannot carry on with that work and you've got to take it back to...
So in terms of what I'm saying is that we wouldn't be able to then publish the document for consultation. We obviously still have to continue that work, but that puts us at a potential disadvantage whereby we're not getting that feedback through the public consultation mechanisms. Clearly, we'll still need to carry on with that work, but then we won't have that feedback specifically. Obviously, I'm assuming on the basis of the Regulation 18 document also being approved, but if that is the case, there is the risk of that. So certainly the work will need to continue, but I think it's certainly the value will be the feedback that we could receive through the public consultation, noting the concerns that have been raised. Certainly we understand that. We've already outlined that position. So we're by no means presenting this as a final position. Clearly there's a lot more work to be done. Obviously the points that Councillor Hoy raised earlier in terms of what, there's a lot of that will be picked up in the next stage, really. This is an early part of that process, and there'll be more work to be done after that.
Thank you, Councillor Linden and Mr Gorter, for taking us down that route, because I think it's an extremely important route, because we can't overlook the fact that this isn't a a chat down the pub and decide what we're going to do. There is a governance process that sits behind it, and I'm now going to turn to the Deputy Chief Executive to help us on a way forward, because you've heard the issues and concerns, and we do our best to be responsible and represent the interests of residents, and make sure that we take the information. But you've heard there's real concerns about the accuracy of the data, and we've not had an opportunity to speak to Sistra about that, and perhaps you could help us in terms of a way forward.
Thank you, Chair. So, sorry, can everyone hear me? Oh, I'll have to lean. Sorry. So, having listened to the discussion, and I know, Chair, you were potentially putting on the table a slightly different way of looking at the recommendation. So, I'm not sure constitutionally we can say that we note it with reservations. We can absolutely put all of the comments in the minutes and add in the minutes that officers will take away all of the comments and feed those back to the consultants to ensure they're considered as part of the next stage of work. I think I just want to pick up the point that Mr. Quilter made, which is sort of a point that I think Councillor Linden was making, which is if this document's not noted, my understanding is that it cannot form part of the consultation, and therefore you will be going out, if you approve the next documents, you'll be going out with a consultation that doesn't include the transport assessment. And I hear all the points from this evening, but I don't think that is a place that we particularly want to be in, accepting that in this first stage report you do have some reservations about it. So my recommendation would be, if you feel able to note the report, but we put all of your comments and concerns into the minutes so that they are acted upon by officers and fed back strongly to Sistra. My other recommendation, which isn't really part of the formal committee, but I think it's worth recording, is that as part of the next stage of transport assessment work, we do invite Sistra to a member briefing to allow them to talk through and answer any concerns directly, if that's possible. And I'm looking at Mr. Quilter to see if that's possible.
I think that's helpful, because there's clearly a wish, and probably by the wider councillor population, but a wish to have some sort of briefing with the experts. So I think that helps us. And certainly we've got to realise the implications, and as I said earlier, it always worries me a little bit with noting, because we have some very serious conversation and discussion and debate on subjects, and noting just dilutes that subsequently. And you've got a feel of the tenor of the debate tonight that there's a lot of unease. But I certainly don't wish to frustrate the process. We've got to somehow work with the process, recognising the concerns that have been aired here tonight. Just let me come to Councillor Newport first, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Webb, because I think you might be wanting to respond specifically to the point made by the Deputy Chief Exec.
Indeed, I do, Chairman, and thank you for letting me respond. I can't actually believe what I'm hearing is that the officers knowingly know that we have doubts about the data, recommending that we put this in front of our residents. I find it astonishing, in fact, that I'm hearing that tonight, and I won't be any part of that, because I think that's willful neglect, and I will not proceed down that road. And I think there is another way of dealing with this, is that we could actually defer this item now, and we could, within a week, have another meeting. I'm quite happy to attend another meeting with the experts in the room to put our minds at rest and vote this through. And that would happen before full council. So there is another road to go down to reassure members and to answer all of those questions. But I'm certainly not going to sit here knowingly know that we've all had doubts about the data. It's quite open. The residents are watching. They know that we're not confident in what we're seeing without those answers to our questions from those very experts. And I don't think that it will look very good on any member in this room to carry on and proceed, just to rush forward to meet the timetable, which we can still do in the alternative, which is deferring this and calling another meeting, which you can do, Chairman, and officers will have to come to another meeting, but that's fine. We can do that, and we can get Sistra along and answer all those questions. And I think that would be the more professional thing to do, in my opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Newport, I'm minded to agree with you. Totally. You know, there is a need for clarification. We're not wishing to frustrate or not vote. We simply are seeking more information from professionals with respect to the fact that no one in this room is purporting to be a professional in the same way that Sistra is a highly complicated subject. We've been waiting for this document for months. It's unfortunate that the timing has occurred over the holiday period, and we're obviously committed to attending the meeting tonight. So whether we use the word adjournment or deferment, and I've just got to be mindful of the Constitution in terms of the words that we use. But the sentiment, I totally agree with you, Councillor Newport. So I think we've possibly got a way forward on that. Now, in deference to Councillor Webb, I ought to listen to comments that he might want to make about the report generally.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of short comments, if I may. I'm in agreement with what members have said already this evening. I'm in total agreement with that. Just reflecting myself, my own journey on the Ashington Road today. It was horrendous. I don't know how long it took, but certainly a lot longer than it should have done. And if you look through the document, page 60, that table there, that doesn't actually show what it's like to drive through those different junctions. I start off at the junction, the Ashington Road, Rectory Road junction, once I've actually managed to turn right onto the Ashington Road, which can take 5 to 10 minutes sometimes. I then go on to the next junction at the Ashington Road, Roachway, Dailies Road junction. I sit there for a while. I then move on to the next one at the Hall Road, West Street junction. If I'm unlucky, I keep going on to the Southend Road, Bradley Way junction, and on to Purdy's Way, and so on and so forth. So although on this table it might look like single junctions that are separated, as a driver, my residents face these junctions continuously, and it's an absolute nightmare on the Ashington Road. A thought that I did have is that if we were working in a hospital, we would try and work at 80 to 90%, so there's a bit of capacity left in the system. If something goes wrong, then it can be dealt with. Experience I had on the Ashington Road a couple of weeks ago was I sat in traffic for, how long? 10, 20 minutes. I finally got moving, and the reason for the delay was a delivery vehicle parked on the Ashington Road that was holding up all the traffic. There was absolutely no capacity in the system, and the residents that I represent experience that frustration on a near daily basis. It doesn't take much. A Tesco delivery van, Asda, parked badly on the Ashington Road, that's it. There is no capacity in the system. Our hospitals are meant to have a degree of capacity, of flexibility, to ensure that when things go wrong, they can cope. The Ashington Road has no capacity at the moment. When something goes wrong, even if it's somebody parking where they shouldn't, that's it. And before you know it, all the residents are late to wherever they're trying to get to. So yeah, I would echo this Chamber's frustrations with this document. I don't think it reflects the reality of what my residents experience on a day-to-day basis, and it certainly doesn't reflect my experiences either. Thank you.
I think the issue we have, and look, I'm not disagreeing with anything that you say, because I use Ashington Road quite frequently. Sometimes I sail along it, other times I don't. What we can't expect Sistra to do is redo data. One has got to assume that the data that they presented to us is the data as they've taken it. What we've got to do is understand why some of their data is at variance to our perceptions. And that's why I think Councillor Newport's suggestion is a good way forward, to have that opportunity to challenge with someone in the room, not say that they're wrong, just simply challenge and sort of say the perception is different from what we're reading in this report. We can't just sort of say, well, we change the data because we don't like the look of it, but it is for them to justify their data. And I think that's a reasonable point. Councillor Linden.
To clarify, to note a report, can you give me the legal ramifications? Because to note a report is basically looking at the overall report without going into the exact specifics of it. So if we noted this report, bearing in mind you've already said that it's going to go back to be looked at and to be addressed all of the points that we're mentioning. So what is the legal ramifications of us noting a report that is then going to be worked on further?
I'll ask the Deputy Chief Executive to come in there.
Thank you. I don't actually think maybe the issue is in the recommendation is perhaps noting the report. I think it's perhaps the second part, which is acknowledges its role as a key evidence base to inform the emerging local plan. I think from what I've heard, that's probably the bigger challenge, but others may correct me. But I think, noting it is one thing, but I think it's the second part, which perhaps from what I've heard is more concerning. And, I'll leave you to discuss that.
Councillor Hoy, and then we need to move it forward.
Yeah, just 2 points. One point and a request. I was going to raise the same point as Fiona just raised about the acknowledging its role as an evidence base for the local plan, which is the next item on the agenda, effectively, the Regulation 18 consultation. If we were to defer this item, would that mean that the next item could not be, or wouldn't really be, couldn't be discussed tonight because we don't know what that would, if that would be informing it correctly or not, if that makes any sense? And two, if you need to discuss anything, could I request a sort of a 3-minute adjournment or something while you discuss what might be moving forward? And I might be able to use the toilet.
I think it would be sensible for us to have at least a 5-minute adjournment while we put our heads together up here. We've got the sentiment, but let's call a 5-minute adjournment at 20:40 by that clock, and come back together again at 20:45. Members, we reconvene and thank you for your forbearance. It took a little longer than we were anticipating, but it is quite clear that there is not comfort about just noting the item. And what I'm going to do is bring a further recommendation, and the recommendation is that this item is moved to the council meeting on the 27th of January, where it will be an item for noting, but in the meantime, there will be an all-member briefing, principally from Sistra, but where officers are present, so that the specific points that have been raised tonight, but certainly from the wider councillor membership, can be considered. But it does mean that councillors, or the onus is on all of us to bring our issues and any concerns that we have about the data, that we actually raise that where the authors of the report are present, so that we can actually hear that. So I'm making a recommendation that the item is moved to the council meeting on the 27th of January for noting. Do I have a seconder to that, please?
With the briefing, will that be in person or online? I personally would prefer it to be in person.
And I would agree with that. I think it's much more helpful if it can be in person. But clearly tonight we've got to leave officers to pull that together. Councillor Hoy, I think you were first.
I do have some concerns how long this briefing would be, and I understand if it's moving to a full council meeting and be a decision of noting by full council, it should be for all members. However, there are members of this committee who would probably want some extensive time asking questions and asking for clarification of items there already are. So would it be possible for members of the committee to have either a pre-briefing with them or allowed to ask the questions first before any time ran out? That was all.
Well, my understanding is that the constitution of the full council would come into play. I don't think there'd be a special allowance for members of this meeting. Look, we are going a little bit into the weeds here. We've got a recommendation. I've made a recommendation. I'm doing my best to try and move a way forward, because I think members have expressed concerns about hearing from the consultant, and the spirit is to try and inform and help. And Councillor Newport made a really useful point earlier, and have developed that point. To further debate it, I think, is pushing it a little bit. Councillor Newport.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. So, just so I'm very clear on this, all the points raised tonight, the officers are captured and will put to Sistra before the briefing. But I think what Councillor Hoy's saying is, if we could have, when we have a member briefing with Sistra, if the planning policy could have like a half-hour extension or whatever, without the rest of the members in the room that aren't on planning policy. I think that's what Councillor Hoy...
Right, apologies, Councillor Hoy. I thought you meant within the council meeting.
Sorry, I don't want to speak for Councillor Hoy.
Sorry, I may not have explained it very well. I think I used the word pre-briefing or something like that, but afterwards...
No, I think that would be totally reasonable, because we are... we've been in on this.
Yeah.
We've looked at the report. We've listened to members of the public. And I think that would be... There could be a pre or post briefing for members of the committee, and echoing Councillor Steptoe's point, I think it would be preferable to do our best to make that an in-person meeting.
Just to finish off, Chairman, and I fully accept Councillor Steptoe wants to have an in-person meeting, but could we just make it hybrid? Is that possible? Because depending on when that is, it's obviously vitally important that we can attend, and some of us might be in work or whatever.
Yeah,
thanks.
So we will take both of those comments away. We have a fairly limited amount of time to get this in reasonably before the 27th full council meeting. so we are a little bit reliant on the consultant and their availability, but we will do our best to have an in-person stroke hybrid meeting. But I can't make promises tonight, I'm afraid, because it's relying on a third party.
We'll do our best. But I think we've also got to temper our own expectations. It's the point that I made earlier. The data in the report, it's perfectly reasonable to question it, but it's for them to tell us whether or not it's accurate or they're willing to change it in the light of any. But we do have to understand this is one of the many documents that's informing the decision making on site selection for the local plan. And I really don't want to go into further debate. I really don't. Otherwise, we'll be here all night talking about the music. Councillor Linder, make it quick.
All I was going to say, it's very important that we do have the public consultation, so sooner rather than later.
Thank you for making that point. Absolutely right. And there is a danger that if we don't go down the route that we're talking about, we would actually take this away from the opportunity for members of the public. Thank you for making that point, despite me wanting to cut you off very quickly. Right. So, for the third time, I'll read it out. I'm recommending that the item is moved to the council meeting on the 27th of January for noting. I think Councillor Linden, you seconded it, didn't you? And can I have a vote on that, please? Those in favour? That's unanimous. Well done, members. Right, we turn to item 8 on the agenda, which is the Rochford Local Plan Regulation 18 consultation document. And I think in the light of our last decision, as well as having an introduction, it would be helpful, and I think it's going to be the Director of Place that helps us in terms of the recommendations there in the light of our previous decision. Am I right?
As I said, as part of the previous debate, there are no decisions in the local plan which have been made on the basis of the work that has been done to date in the Sistra report. So, as you see from the local plan, there are no sites which have been allocated in the local plan which rely on the Sistra work. So we're very comfortable for decisions to continue to be made on this item. Just in terms of the, Mr. Coulter will introduce the report in a second, but just to be clear on the recommendations within the report. So the first recommendation is that that the Planning Policy Committee take the draft local plan as set out in Appendix A to be approved for public consultation for a minimum of 6 weeks pursuant to Regulation 18 of the Town and Country Planning Act. So just to be clear, the decision that you have before you tonight is for the local plan as set out in that appendix, so those 200 and odd pages, to be subject to a public consultation. Regulation 18 is the formal legal regulation that abides by that. If you send the local plan out for consultation, any evidence base that we have previously noted, which is already published on the website, plus the transport assessment, if it was to be noted at the council meeting, will also be available on our website, which will mean that they are also available for comment as part of that public consultation period. But just to be clear, that recommendation R1 is specifically around the local plan document itself, i.e. those policies and visions and objectives that you see within the report before you tonight.
Thank you. And is there any further introduction of the report? Mr. Quilter.
Thank you, Chair. So, Chair members, the next item is the draft Rochford Local Plan Regulation 18 consultation document. This marks an important stage in preparing the new local plan for the district. The document sets out an initial draft of the plan for consultation and is designed to seek views from residents, businesses and stakeholders on the emerging strategy, policies and evidence. It is important to stress that this is a draft for consultation only and does not represent the final plan. Feedback received will inform the development of the Regulation 19 document, which will be subject to further consultation before submission for examination. The local plan must be prepared in accordance with national planning policy and legislation, including the National Planning Policy Framework and associated guidance. Plan must demonstrate that it is positively prepared, justified, effective and consistent with national policy to be found sound at examination. This means addressing housing needs, supporting economic growth and planning for infrastructure while protecting the environment and responding to climate change. As set out in the draft plan, the vision is to create a sustainable future for Rochford District, one that supports thriving communities, a strong local economy and a high quality of life while safeguarding the district's unique character and natural assets. The strategic objectives underpinning the vision include delivering the right homes in the right places, supported by infrastructure, promoting sustainable transport and reducing reliance on the private car, supporting local businesses and employment opportunities, protecting and enhancing the natural environment and biodiversity, responding to climate change through low carbon development and renewable energy, and ensuring high quality design and creating healthy, inclusive communities. National policy requires us to start with the government's standard method figure, which provides a baseline for the number of homes expected over the plan period. For Rochford, this represents a significant level of growth. However, this figure is not automatically accepted. It will need to be tested against local circumstances, including environmental constraints, infrastructure capacity and deliverability. The draft plan makes clear that while we cannot ignore this requirement, the consultation provides an opportunity to explore whether adjustments are justified and how growth can be managed in a way that is sustainable and realistic. It is also important to note that specialist housing such as care homes can contribute towards meeting overall housing needs, with provision counted using nationally recognised ratios to reflect the homes likely freed up in the local area. The document includes indicative sites for testing. To be clear, as set out in the draft plan, these are not proposed allocations or preferred sites. They reflect the work undertaken to date using the site assessment methodology and are included to allow feedback through consultation. Further evidence gathering and technical work will be required before decisions are made on which sites should be allocated in the Regulation 19 plan. This approach ensures transparency and gives communities the opportunity to comment on the options before any decisions are taken. Alongside the draft plan, members are asked to consider the engagement strategy for the Regulation 18 consultation. This strategy aims to ensure that consultation is inclusive, accessible and reaches as many people as possible. It includes a mix of online and in-person engagement, targeted communication to key stakeholders, and opportunities for communities to provide feedback in ways that suit them. The approach reflects lessons learned from previous consultations and seeks to build confidence in the process by making it clear how feedback will be considered in shaping the next stage of the plan. Overall, this consultation is an opportunity for the community and stakeholders to comment on the emerging strategy, the proposed policies and the evidence base. The feedback we receive will be critical in shaping the next stage of the plan and ensuring it is robust, deliverable and meets the needs of Rochford District. Alongside this, further technical work will continue on transport, infrastructure, environmental assessments to support the Regulation 19 plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quilter. Members, could you avoid repetition? Could you keep your comments fairly brief? I don't want to constrain discussion, but I would like to get to the recommendations before 9:30. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Once again, I was quite disappointed in not really having the big opportunity to be able to go through and study this. Having only got the report at 3:30 on Monday, it's not been possible to really fully understand it. A couple of questions, though. One around the area plans, i.e. the town centre plans, Rayleigh, Hockley and Rochford. I'm assuming those plans that are emerging on this document will override the existing plans and be updated. I'm a little concerned that we haven't done something similar for places like Great Wakering and Hullbridge, for example, because they are key areas of the economy and they are growing substantially, you know, with the amount of housing that is coming forward, and I think that needs to be considered. The other thing was, with regards to what was known as the Joint JAC report, which is the Joint Area Action Plan, with Southend around the environments around Southend Airport. Is that still current? Is that being updated as part of this plan, or will that be subject to a secondary report? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Mr. Quilter. Or Mr. Budler.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. So absolutely take your point around the town centre policies and the area action plans within them. We thought it prudent to have town centre specific policies within the document. However, as it is Reg 18 and it's relatively early stage of consultation, we do acknowledge they need additional work, and that's something we want to help develop through the public consultation. However, the existing for Hockley, Rochford and Rayleigh area action plans, quite a lot of work, a lot of consultation resources went into those before they were adopted in 2014, 2015. A lot of the points within them are still relevant. A lot of the aims and objectives, still have some merit, although albeit a lot of the objectives are yet to be fully realised, I think it's fair to say. It would be probably a separate decision by council to pursue something like an SPD on that scale. However, for now, I think it's relevant to still note the policies within them. But I think that's something we need to tease out through the consultation and further refine, post.
Very quickly, Councillor Steptoe, to give other people
Yeah, if I
chances.
just come back with regards to Great Wakering and Holbridge. Holbridge have had something around 600 additional properties since the last area plan. Great Wakering has something around 500, with the potential coming forward of around another 1,500. Mm-hmm. So I think there needs to be some consideration given to how we can take that on board as part of the action plan, because it's going to be far more crucial. We need more facilities in places like Holbridge and Great Wakering to be able to look after the housing. And I did ask around the JAP report as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's a fair point. As settlements grow, and it's certainly part of what we've been talking about, that as a place grows, it needs the right amenities so people aren't compelled to drive further than they need to access the basic everyday services. So perhaps we do need to look. I think there is a policy in there around kind of village centres and neighbourhood parades, but it probably does need fleshing out, and perhaps within that we can talk about the specific character of some of the larger villages and how they could be developed. In terms of the JAP, we do have a policy in there relating to, we have an airport policy in there which does reference the JAP, talks about, I think, the JAP continuing to be referred to until is it 2031? However, we will be looking to explore with Southend as well, of course, a course of action to identify successor strategy to that. The existing draft policy that we have in there around the airport has been developed in conjunction with Southend Council, so the bit inside the box at least has the same wording. So we are working closely with them on that, and with Essex County Council as well. So any additional work on that we would be discussing cross boundary, but certainly the JAP will need to be revisited.
Chairman, is it possible that we can put something in that places like Great Wakering and Holbridge in particular have some consideration given for members of the public to actually be consulted on what they would like to see in those areas going forward?
Yeah, I think that point is noted, and it's absolutely right that the smaller communities that are rapidly growing account needs to be taken over the 15-year term of the new local plan to reflect the growth in those areas, or potential growth in their areas. Looks like the Director of Place is wishing to...
Yeah, I think just to say, so I don't think we're proposing it's something that we're going to add in prior to council, but I think it's something that as we're developing the spatial elements of the plan, which will look at, whether developments will be allocated in those areas, that will help inform and develop. But we could potentially put in another question into the draft local plan, which asks that question around what might people want to see within those areas, which then could capture that and inform a policy or some words in the later version of the plan.
And given the point that Councillor Steptoe has made tonight, bear that in mind, please, as part of the consultation. Right, other members. Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chairman. So I do have a few questions to ask, and I have asked many questions in advance of this meeting to the Director of Place. So one of the questions that I have is that on the front cover of this report, you'll see a section that says legal, but there are no evidence legal services that have been instructed to advise on our vulnerability to judicial review, examination, risk or remedy if the evidence changes materially after consultation. And this is because I'm asking this question as to why we haven't received any legal advice, because we know that significant elements of the evidence base is missing from this report. So that would be my first question. My second question, and that will build on our last meeting, in fact, when we sat here and we specifically asked the officers about employing a GIS expert to produce the maps. And I see in this report there's just a placeholder. We're being asked about the consultation and whether we're happy with it, but we haven't seen the map and we haven't seen the GIS system that the officers have come up with. So that's really important, because I've seen, and Mr. Kudlow will remember many a time when I have picked them up on the quality of mapping, and this is really important to the consultation, is that it's easy to use, it's easy to visualise, easy to operate for our residents, especially when there's different layers of data.
Councillor Newport, I want to come in there. We debated that very heavily. Officers were very clear on our requirements. I agree with you totally, but it is a duplication of what we talked about at length.
But we haven't seen what we're going to put out for consultation.
There was never any commitment to bring it back to this meeting, but officers are very clear on the requirements. You made it very clear.
Yeah, what my point is, we are being asked about the consultation.
Yeah.
And that's the point I'm making, is how can I comment on it if I
I'm
haven't
concerned that with 10 minutes to go, we're going to miss, and we have a responsibility to try and move this through, if at all possible. And I don't want to go through duplication, but fair point.
No.
Can we go to an answer?
So hang on, I've got some other questions to ask.
Are we just not going to hit the deadline, are we?
So is that, when you say we're not going to hit the deadline, sorry, am I not to ask questions?
I didn't say that. I said I would prefer there not to be duplication of issues.
No, I'm not. These aren't duplicates.
Right, okay, well, if we can move it forward, please.
What firm commitments exist from Essex Highways, NHS England, Anglian Water, and the Environment Agency confirming the capacity and funding, not aspirations or future studies? Have we got written confirmation about the infrastructure and our requirements? And I'll just sum up with another question, which was, how does the engagement strategy address consultation fatigue and digital exclusion when major evidence remains unavailable, limiting meaningful participation?
Thank you. So in terms of the mapping, as we've discussed previously, yes, we are working on that, and we've taken on board the comments that have been received. We do acknowledge that, yes, of course, that's important. Clearly, mapping is a good way of representing some of that information. In terms of the comments around statutory bodies, I would refer back to the discussion that we had in previous committees around the IDP, the Infrastructure Delivery Plan. That's primarily where that's been dealt with. And obviously, there will be a consultee. They will be able to respond to the consultation. In respect of the engagement strategy, certainly that's the document that's presented. Obviously, gives an overview of the approach that can be taken, and clearly we want to make sure that it's covering as much as possible in terms of what's required. So we can certainly take that away and have a consideration about any further methods that may be able to be utilised.
Nothing else? Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a number of questions, but before I start on the questions, just a quick...
Right, I will be cutting you off after maximum of 5 minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes. It seems a very poor way of doing this. The first question in there, therefore, is around the Watery Lane development. I want to know why that's classified under Rawrath, not under Holbridge, because it seems to be assessing it based on it being in Rawrath, which is in the parish of Rawrath, but essentially it's a an attachment to the village of Holbridge. So, and the assessment therefore seems to be wrong. It's not assessing it in the correct way. So that's the first one. Then I'll move on to the questions. I think they're all semi-linked. So if I ask them all, there's probably about 7 or 8, but they're all around the policies, strategic policies that we're talking about. So the first one is around the sustainable growth. The policy is asserting sustainability as a guiding principle, yet it's sort of putting the growth in locations with structural car dependency and poor infrastructure delivery. So how does testing large-scale growth in villages and edge of settlement locations where the transport assessment confirms high car dependency? I know what we've done about that. How does it align with the requirement to direct development to the most sustainable locations? It doesn't appear to be. Which tested locations would fail if assessed strictly against transport sustainability rather than land availability? Then I just want to move on to distribution of growth, really. So how does the scale of growth being tested in settlements such as Holbridge align with their position in the settlement hierarchy, and what would cause growth to be redirected to fewer higher order locations? So in other words, is a hierarchy actively shaping the site selection, or is it simply describing the settlements after sites have been identified? I'm just trying to clear it up. And then, this is something I've raised before, I'm sorry, I'm just going to raise it again. How can the council demonstrate that exceptional circumstances for Greenbelt release are being objectively tested when Regulation 18 sites and housing numbers are published before the Greenbelt review is finalised? What Greenbelt conclusions, if any, are genuinely still open to change following Regulation 18? Which elements of the growth strategy rely on infrastructure that is not yet funded or committed, and what enforceable mechanisms will prevent development proceeding ahead of that infrastructure? I know that probably bears on something that Councillor Liverpool said, so I'll move on. I won't ask a further question on that to clarify it. I've asked one about sustainable transport already. I'll leave this one because you seem to be in a hurry. What practical flexibility does it provide if consultation responses or completed evidence show that Regulation 18 sites are undeliverable or unsuitable? Would the sites be removed entirely, or would housing numbers simply be redistributed elsewhere? What piece of outstanding evidence are capable of materially changing the spatial strategy, and how will members and the public be informed if that happens after Regulation 18, which again points to something that has been asked already? And is there a realistic scenario in which Regulation 18 responses can lead to a fundamentally different strategy at Regulation 19? I will leave that there.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy.
Yeah, thank you. I think in terms of the majority of those questions, I think obviously relating to sites, and I understand the points being raised, I think it would probably be best to, obviously we've had the site assessment methodology paper item at last committee that kind of outlines...
sorry, Chairman, they're not site specific, they're generally about the strategic policies within the document.
Okay. In terms of the point around the location of the Watery Lane site, you're right, that is reflective of the parish boundary, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're not reflective or understanding of that site being adjoining Holbridge. So I think that's fair to say, and that's reflective of the SAM paper. In terms of the points being raised around exceptional circumstances and the Greenbelt, obviously we've been clear in this document that these sites are not proposed allocations. And they're not preferred sites at this stage. There is further testing which would include the Greenbelt work when that's underway, that inform the next stage, Reg 19. And in terms of a lot of those other points, in terms of whether there would be any redistribution or what would constitute redistribution, what would happen to those numbers, clearly that'll be a consideration for as we develop the Reg 19. If there are fundamental points being raised, and clearly any points raised in the consultation that are material that we need to consider, whether that's from members of the public or statutory parties, then we would need to consider that further and make those decisions at that point in time. Obviously, again, emphasising these sites have not at this point in time been identified as allocations. So there'll be more to come back with on that. Apologies for going through that quick, but I think that's in terms of covering those main points, I think that's the main items there.
Right. It's not my personal wish to constrain conversation.
Sorry, Chairman, I don't think
but
the
we're hitting the deadline. I'm going to have to take it straight to the recommendations. All these points can be taken outside the meeting. You've had every opportunity, Councillor Hoy, to raise these things in writing. And Councillor Newport said that he'd raised a number of things, so I'm going to go straight to the recommendations.
Chairman,
and they write
as
points
has
of
been
order.
stated by Councillor Steptoe, we have had very little time to read this report. I think I've done very well to get this
You have
report.
done.
I am a working councillor. I work full time.
You have done very well, but I don't wish to constrain, but you have the benefit as a councillor to be able to approach any of these officers at any time and raise the points. I'm going to go to the recommendations.
Chairman, you do not understand my personal circumstances.
You've been bustling to waste time. Recommendation R1, can you refrain, please, Councillor Hoy? Recommendation 1, that the Planning Policy Committee approve and recommends to full council that the draft Rochford local plan set out in Appendix A be approved for public consultation for a minimum of 6 weeks, pursuant to Regulation 18 of the Town and Country Planning, Local Planning England Regulations 2012, as detailed in this report. Those in favour?
Chairman, does that include the questions about Great Waker and Holbridge?
Yes. Those in favour? And those against? 5-2.
Can I have my vote recorded as being against, please, Chairman?
Certainly.
Can you put my vote in the minutes, please?
Recommendation 2, that delegated authority be granted to the Director of Place in consultation with the Chair of the Planning Policy Committee to make any necessary minor and non-material amendments prior to consultation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Reeves. Those in favour? 5. Those against? 2. Recorded? Yep, recorded both of those. Recommendation 3, that the Planning Policy Committee approves the local plan Regulation 18 engagement strategy set out in Appendix B and authorise the Director of Place to finalise and implement the strategy. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Reeves. Those in favour? 5. Those against? 1. Abstaining? Councillor Newport, thank you for that. Look, I apologise for the fact that you clearly understand that you've got to rush it. We do have to comply with governance rules. It's not my wish, but there has been plenty of opportunity for discussion. It's not my wish to constrain debate. Thank you very much indeed for some very good points that have been made tonight. But I would urge you, there's some good stuff that's come out. I would urge you to take this up through officers. I'd like to be involved if you wish to involve me. And we've got to do our best by our residents to get the best possible outcome on this process. Thank you very much indeed. Appreciate your time. And I'll close the meeting at bang on 21:30.